Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Let's do this. This week's launched Kickstarters, what's out there, what's being funded, what's currently trying to fund, what is sapping up your money, your time, your screen time. So, bunch of stuff launching, a little bit of everything, just like usual. Trying to highlight as much as I can for you guys, trying to give you as much detail as I can without going overboard. So let's take a look here in a minute. As a side note, I will be trying to put out some other videos in the next week or so of reviews. I love it that you guys were so creative when I put out that video earlier in the week asking for suggestions. And I've got one or two top contenders, so you'll see it when it launches. I am just not creative in that way, so I really appreciate just the ingenuity and the simplicity sometimes of you guys when it comes to this stuff. So expect to have one or two out hopefully in the next week, and then just kind of, whatever else comes up, just like with all my videos, with all of my scheduling, there is no scripting. It just kind of happens as it happens. I wish there was more of a pattern to it, but it's just kind of sort of how I am at this point too. So I've made my peace with that. And apparently maybe you have too if you're checking out and actually sticking around and watching these videos as they come out. So thanks. Okay. I think that's about it. Yeah. That sounds good enough. Let's do this. So first up we have L.O.O.P, The Life of Ordinary People. And it takes this theme and it's directly related to the people who made it because they're from Hong Kong, and it talks about one of the richest places on earth, but also satisfaction and happiness being like 78th overall in the world. And they talk about it in the sense of you're working, you're buying, you're consuming, and you're just rinsing and repeating and trying to break this loop of this cycle that is sort of a real life example in a tabletop setting. It reminds me just on the premise of the board game Pursuit of Happiness. Very similar sort of mindset, I guess, when I'm looking at this. 3 times its funding goal already, and they've really been emphasizing the eco-friendly and the downplay on the consumer side of things from a sustainability aspect as well. And they talk about the loop itself, and as you can see, it's incorporated in sort of multiple aspects here. This picture in and of itself, but then they also say each of these pictures that are part of the art are formed from one contiguous line without raising it up. And so you can kind of see that if you actually pay close attention there. And so that is, incorporation of the theme in even the art style. And you can kind of see what you're getting here in the game. The biggest problem I have with this page is as I scanned up and down, it doesn't give me a breakdown of how it plays. You actually have to watch one of the videos. And they have some pretty good videos on here. Shelfside does like a 25-minute video of a review with pros and cons, and I kind of looked at that a little bit, but all in all, I just wish there was a little bit more detail of what the game actually is. There's plenty of quotes here, but it's more zen-like in your contemplation of the meta side of things, which, there's definitely some insight and some thoughtfulness that goes along with that. The game itself, $40. You get the exclusives with the career and the event. And then the early bird with $65, which gets you all of these add-ons and all of these stretch goals, which honestly is a pretty big price point. And then you just have the regular price at $72. It seems like something that's interesting. It seems like something that's a little bit meta. And they go out of their way to emphasize, hey, look, we have these extensions. We have these add-ons. And there are some stretch goals for this future expansion pack and things like this, but this is not one of those games where we have already taken content out of the base game to make it additional on top of that. It is a self-contained game, and we're just giving you extra options and extra variety if we want to from that side of things. Again, I don't really know. Some of this challenge scenarios, solo mode, language pack, a few stretch goals here, which are probably actually stretch goals. Here's the sustainability side of things that I mentioned. But you can see I don't get the sense of what the game is. Like, how does the game actually play? Because you have to watch one of these rulebooks. Even the tutorial is not in English, so I couldn't even watch that. I had to go to one of those reviews. So that's probably my biggest concern, is just what is this game actually like when you're playing it? And so what I have found out is on your turn, you get to do one of 3 different actions. You work, you earn money. You buy, you get more items. You consume, you complete activities. All of these have a different effect on your level of happiness for that turn. You have favorite cards, but they're also trap cards that are going to affect your happiness as well, taking you either deeper or out of the loop, depending on what you choose. They say that these trap cards are inspired by real-life marketing consumerism targeting people on a daily basis. You also get to choose your own career. All of these are going to have factors and influences on that level of happiness, trying to achieve the maximum happiness by the end of the game. It's an interesting concept. It's a little bit too meta for me, but I think it would be an interesting gameplay experience to try, but it definitely wouldn't be something that I would be super interested in from a buying standpoint on Kickstarter. But it reminds me, again, like I said, Pursuit of Happiness, more of the Japanese one that came out just a little while ago, Zen Tiles, more of that mindfulness exercise wrapped in a board game shell, if you will. And if that sounds interesting to you, because I know that is a hit with a lot of people too, check it out. Next up is Hungry Life, and this is an Animal Kingdom educational game. So what are you doing in this game? This is a little bit different take on just the tile laying, card playing, hand management style game with an educational feature to it as well. So you can see a little bit of what it looks like just with the pictures here. If you scroll down, you can see a little bit of the setup here. I'll just skip right to that. So depending on the player count, you have a certain size deck. So like with 2 players, you have a 25 card deck. You're drawing 5 into your hand, and then you are placing a base card down, and then you are playing cards around it in order to simulate sort of the food chain-esque events. So like they say, animals placed on top of things that they eat. You play as many or as all as you can, and then you are moving on to the next round. Now, to be clear, this is not an everybody plays on their own thing. This is a community style setting. So you are going to be trying to place your cards on there strategically, because the goal of this game is to have all of your cards placed first. And it plays from anywhere to 2 to 5 players, which then decreases the amount of cards in your deck in the first place. Here you can see an example of sort of what the cards are. It breaks it down by what types of foods or plants that they eat. And then it sees, a little bit more of a breakdown of that exactly. And then you can sort of see what category it falls in terms of the animal type, and then where it falls on that food chain as well. So here is an example of what you can kind of see in terms of the food chain stacking and what can go on top of each other on subsequent turns. There are other things that are going to affect it. Humans, and then natural events, as, we're not the only ones affected by those things. Animals are too. Now, the other way to mitigate things they talk about is by moving animals from one place to another that matches. And then it just gives you a little bit more information. This is where the educational side of things comes in. More out of less gameplay aspect, but just making it, again, like I said, the truly educational experience, showing some of the things like lifespan and how big they actually are, and what their status is in terms of endangered or not. So that's about it. And you can see the breakdown of, they even do it by continent. So what are we looking at here in terms of pledges? European version is $17 or 12 euros. 12 euros for North American. Double pack is a little bit better deal. So, this is just a nice educational, quick to get to the table sort of puzzle game for the family, for kids, for school even. So I don't know if it'll fund. It's about a third of the way there. There's definitely a small market for this, and I think that's the biggest problem. But we'll see what happens. And the fact that it's already at that amount for the price point it's at too is pretty good. So that's your jam. Check it out. Next up is Foundation from Cubiko Games. Gavin Birnbaum. And like I said last week, I'm a big fan of these games. This is right up my alley. This is a handmade wooden board game. And Foundation is a game back from 10 years ago, one of the first ones that they had put out. It's an abstract game where you have your color tiles, as you can see here on the game. And what you're doing is you're laying them down one at a time. And the points you score are based on how many other tiles it touches when you lay it down, no matter if it's your own tile or the other person's tile. And so you play until no more tiles can be put down. And the tiles are Tetris-esque, so there's all different shapes and sizes on both sides, but I think it's a symmetric amount on each side. So it's not like you have super oblong shapes this way and they have, no, you have both the same shapes and the same amounts. And so you lose points at the end of the game if you have any shapes left that are not played, and that's it. Now the problem, and just like I said last week, what I was afraid of was that the cheapest pledge level on this of plywood is $70 US, which is a ton. And I would love it in walnut or ash or something like that, but then you're talking $91 or $84, and that's just a ton of money for abstract game of its nature. I mean, I just can't justify that when I can get potentially 3 other games like the GIF series or Hive or Talk all for that price as well. And I appreciate the handmade quality. I have a copy of Karoo, one of the other games in his collection, that is just absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favorite dexterity games. It's just bocce ball on a tabletop setting. But this has been the problem with my last 2 or 3 of these that I've looked at, and why I haven't ended up getting them is just the price point. Now, the other thing I'll say, though, is, and this is the reason I still have it saved, is because if you don't get these, I mean, these don't show up hardly at all on the secondary market, and when they do, they sell for usually easily the amount, if not a little bit more, just because the supply is next to nil. I mean, like I said, right now, it's at 61. It'll probably be 100, a little plus 100, 120, 150 at most. And that's not a high number of games, which means there's an even lower number of games that end up on the secondary market. And as you know, supply is low, demand is anything, price goes up. And so that would be my only concern, is that if I want this in the future, I'm just not going to be able to get it. So that is my FOMO when it comes to Cubiko games. And that's why I haven't fully decided yet, because I would love to get this game, but I just don't know. I just don't know if I want to pay that price point as much as I really want this game. And this is, yeah, I mean, this is a proven game. This is not a question, again, like with a lot of abstracts, you don't have doubt of what the gameplay is. You know what it is, period. It's solid. And he puts out a solid product, and it's usually even sometimes a little bit early in when it ships. But, I mean, shipping is probably going to be another 15 or 20 bucks on top of that. So you're talking $90 for a wooden abstract game. And that is tough for me to swallow. As much as I like abstracts, as much as I like the idea of this game, as easy as this would be to play, and as much as I would like to play it, I just don't know. But, like I said, if you have interest in this, you definitely have to check it out, because it's not going to be available probably easily otherwise. So that is Foundation. It has 11 days to go at this point. I'm going to mention this just because I think this is kind of cool. TERA Dice, Japanese architectural dice design. I have no other affiliation to it. It just looks kind of neat and, you know, cool looking dice. Sorry, just had to throw that in there just to change things up a little bit. Okay, next up is 1979, Revolution in Iran. Another historical card game. These are popping up all over the place, and there is definitely a market, because as you saw last week and the week before, these things are getting funded, and people are buying these, and people like these historically accurate games, period. Whether it's a war game, a card game, or something in between. And they talk about this, that this is based on real life events that actually happened in 1979 in the Revolution of Iran. And this is a card driven game. So you're just playing cards from your hand, and you have a number of actions based on the cards in your hand of what you can do. So again, and this is, I mean, this is staying true. You're either the reformers or the royalists, and you are manipulating the forces that are playing at large in Iran at that time. The other spin, sort of like one of the games last week, is this is a card drafting, meaning all the cards are splayed out in front of you, and you are drafting them into your hand that you're going to be using, which means a lot of the luck is being taken out of it. So you're getting strategy in terms of which cards you're drafting, but then the tactical nature, because the other person knows which cards you have, of how you're going to use them and what order you're going to use them. Now, it's a little longer. I mean, this is a 90-minute to 2-hour game. That's a big game, and that's more of a war game. But you can see sort of the what it looks like, and these are the action points in the upper corner there. And they even give you a little bit of a tutorial there. And this is true stretch goals: a map, historical notes, and wooden bits if they hit the goal. So that's it. I mean, you can watch the video if you want, but again, this is a niche game. But based on true historical events, these games sell well, whether it's PAX Premier or one of the All or Nothing games. The other American Revolution one that I showed last week. check it out if you're interested. They're popping up, and I think they're going to become more popular. Okay, now we're going to talk about a little bit more of what I'm familiar with and what came up last week, and this is Hippocrates. Hippocrates, who is thought in the modern day as the father of medicine back in, 400 BC or so. And so the premise of this game is you are disciples of his, learners of his after he passes away, and you are operating the first hospital in history. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring patients in, you're trying to queue them in order of how they need to be treated, you're trying to hire new doctors, hire new staff, trying to get the resources that you need, and then match up the staff with the patients in order to optimize the most care that you can do. And it is taking a Euro-style game spin on that concept. And this is a vastly underappreciated, underused theme, in my opinion, because it's hard to do, and it's hard to do well. You've seen games like Clinic. I think there's MD Rush. And now this. I mean, and this is definitely, of the two, this is a completely different style and frame than those. So what are you actually getting? As we have seen in the past, as you've heard me say, if you've listened to any of my other videos when I talk about Euro games, look, there's going to be a deluxe edition. And if you are doing anything, you're getting the deluxe edition. And I hope, I have not looked at the pledge levels here, but let's take a look. Is there even a retail version? No, there is not a retail version. So perfect. It doesn't even provoke the dilemma for the 60 people that end up getting it. You're getting the deluxe version, period. $82 though. So how does that compare to the other Euros at the deluxe level we've seen? Well, it's probably not in the middle, slightly on the higher side of the middle. So maybe like 66th, 70th percentile, 75th percentile of the cost compared to the other deluxe. Because we've seen ones that are in the 90s and the 100s. We've also seen ones that are in the 50s and the 60s. So it's sort of in that sense. So here you go. I mean, the production, again, with these Euro games tends to be very high. You've got all the usual suspects, sort of doing a little bit of everything here. Man versus Meeple, Rado. And so what are you actually getting? Okay, big box, large game board where you're going to be using these for action spaces down here. You're getting an insert, the player boards, all the other stuff with the doctors and the tokens and the blah, blah, blah. Okay, so add-ons. Oh, there you go. Metal coins. If you had metal coins on your bingo sheet, take a drink. Anyway, extra rule book. Okay, great. If in case you need one in a different language too. So again, how are you playing? I went through the 4 rounds, and they have 5 phases each that I mentioned in terms of where you're welcoming patients in, and then what you're doing is you're putting them in rows. And so you're selecting from which row you want. And some are going to get you bonuses, some are going to get you penalties, and maybe even extra assistance. So that's how you're doing that phase. Then you collect your offerings and you get sort of the money that they're paying you after, and then you put them in the exam rooms that you need to. Then, obviously, you have to pay your doctors based on the money you just got. You have to hire other staff. If you just don't have enough staff in order to treat them, then you're treating them in order to have the right resources, in order to cure what ails them, literally speaking. And then, final phase, you discharge them, and you get victory points based on that and your reputation. So, again, it's relatively straightforward. The rule book is right here. Like I said, there's plenty of video. So, again, this should be relatively straightforward in terms of what you're getting. There should not be a lot of unknowns when it comes to this. So, if you are looking for something that is different in terms of theme, in terms of mechanisms, I think this is probably one of the more different ones I've seen this year so far. And it's probably more appealing to me just from the medicine side of things, because that's where my own interests more lie. But is it going to be better or worse than other Euros? Well, again, Euros aren't my thing, guys. I can't really tell you on that side of things. So you're going to have to watch some of the videos. You're going to have to just look for yourself. And you're just going to have to check out this rulebook. Because if they're going to put a rulebook up there nowadays, I think, I used to not do this a whole lot in the past. But speaking from past experiences of getting burned and not getting burned, looking at the rulebook here can really be a make it or break it in terms of whether or not you're okay with how these things work. And this is not a long rule book. It's only about 16 pages, where you usually have 2 on the fluff side of things at the end and at the beginning. So really, you're probably looking at more like 12 pages. The pictures are numerous. And so you can really sit down and probably break this thing out in 15, 20 minutes and know whether or not this is for you, probably without even having to look at one of the videos, just by the mechanisms and how straightforward the rule book is. So I would say check it out if you're interested, just because of the nature of these Euro games. And I know there are plenty of you that are watching my channel somehow that got lost and got sucked into the black hole that is me, and have stayed around, so thank you for that. But if you're interested in this, I think this is one that's worth checking out. So that is Hippocrates. Okay, speaking of the hype. Oh, look, that's funny. I'm already backing. Mythic Battles Ragnarok. I know all of you who have been following for any length of time are like, oh, he's backing. Well, yeah, of course, right? So it's, at the time of filming this, it's already almost $1 million, and that's pretty impressive, regardless of what you were expecting. $1 million is still $1 million, because those are still few and far between, however you want to base them and whatever criteria you want to use, even if you want to say, oh, it's just a miniatures game. Well, this miniatures game has a pedigree to go on from the previous Pantheon, the Greek Pantheon, that is. And this is primarily, if you're looking at it, I'm going to be putting out a should you back game going over this Pantheon, what else is out there, what you should be comparing it to, what's a good interest, what's a good level, all of that stuff. So I'm just going to give a brief synopsis here. This is a 1v1 skirmish game. Now, they say it can play up to 4 people, but if you talk with skirmish people, but just multiplayer games like this in general, they are best at 1-to-1. Second best at 2v2. The 1v1v1 and the 3-player situation is just like any of these games. It brings a problem because there's a gang up on the leader and it just doesn't work out well. And then there's player elimination, then followed by the other two duking it out for the win. So really what you're looking at this one for, primarily, probably 90% of the backers right now are looking at it from probably a 1v1 standpoint. And that's where I'm looking at it too. Now, $1 million, I guess, just looking at it on the periphery right now, that's only 5,600 backers. Usually you're seeing a lot more, and I think part of that is due to the pledge levels. And this is where my biggest dilemma is going to come in, is I have the Norse God pledge right now, which is the core and all the stretch goals. And you've heard me say this in the past too. I will probably split it up, and I'm probably going to get at least, to be honest, this one right here, the War of Gods pledge, the Norse God pledge, and all the expansions. But the question is whether or not I'm going to get the Yggdrasil all-in pledge. And I'm having second thoughts right now, mainly because someone said, if you want to combine these, you need sleeves because the card backs are slightly different. And so you need the sleeves. And this one does offer sleeves. And so I would only have to buy some sleeves because, let's be honest, if I have all of Pantheon and if I have Ragnarok, I'm not going to want to separate these out. I'm going to want to play with both. And they talk about how you can play with both because there are some issues in terms of compatibility, but they already have gone into at great detail on this page how to combine them. So I'm not going to go into that. You need to read the page. But here you go. If by any other thing, the best value is going to be the core pledge. Let's just be honest. It was with Mythic Battle Pantheon, and it's going to be with Ragnarok as well, because they're going to hit a bunch of stretch goals. There's going to be a stretch goal box that is probably the size of the core box to begin with. If you want to know what the core box looks like, there's a couple unboxing videos, including one by the King of Average that came out a couple days prior to the campaign. So there's plenty of information. There's plenty of units. If it's anything like the first one, that is probably all you really need. Need. Are you going to want more? Absolutely. As you can see on this other pledge level, without even scrolling down, Asgard expansion, Ragnar Saga expansion, Jormungand expansion, Cert expansion, Nighthawk expansion. I don't need the artwork, but I'll probably end up getting it. And they're already unlocking stuff after stuff after stuff. You've already got like a dozen stretch goals here. So there's probably going to be a dozen or 2 dozen more because of just what it's going to hit. Now, is it true stretch goals? Is it fake stretch goals? Probably the latter, but I don't never know with some of these bigger ones because they space some of these out, but they're not terribly spacing them out like CMON levels, at least yet, but they are starting to space a few of them out a little bit more. So we'll see. Here you go. This is the breakdown. And as what was the concern was, would you be able to get some of the Mythic Battle Pantheon in this? And it looks like, yes, there's going to be a significant chunk of the previous Kickstarter campaign available, but a lot of it is probably going to be piecemeal during the Pledge Manager, I think. So that's where they click for more detail. And this is the semi-controversial thing I'm not going to go into right now either, is that they, just like Primal, are including VAT for the non-backers. It's being factored into all the prices. So if you are a non-Europe person, you are paying somebody else's VAT in part. How big a deal is that to you? Anyway, I'll leave that one alone right now. And you can get both cores. And this is probably, if you're looking at things, this is probably one of the cores is probably the best pledge. This is probably the second best value, just in terms of being able to get both cores plus both expansions in terms of stretch goals. So that's going to be more than you'll ever need right there. And I'm going to have way more than I'm going to ever need. So really the question is just going to be, do I need all of these other expansions? And for me personally, I got only a couple of the expansions during the first Kickstarter campaign, and I got the rest of the big box ones during the second 1.5 campaign. Now, again, there is the rule book, and there's the nuance there, the gameplay here, and they talk about how you're going to be mishmashing them in terms of some gods previously versus some of the gods here, and, just how you're going to be mishmashing them and sort of balancing rules in terms of how you're evening things out, but how you're mitigating things as well. So there's plenty of information already on day one when you're matching divinities between these two pantheons. And again, they're going through everything you need here in terms of what these character dashboards are, how you use them, here are the powers, what's different here versus what was different in the first time. Special dice I don't care about. Here's the size of the miniature so you can kind of get a sense. And the boards just look absolutely beautiful. You're getting 4 boards in the core. And here you go with some of the add-ons. Here's the Asgard one. Again, I think a lot of people were not very happy that you have 2 major characters that are relatively well-known, Odin and Heimdall, in one of the expansions, along with Valkyries. So, but I mean, that's a lot of stuff right there in an expansion. That's why it's $60, right? You're also getting, 2 double-sided boards, or, well, 1 double-sided board. And that had been some of the biggest concern in some of the previous expansions. It's just how much and how value savvy are some of those big box expansions, because just like on most Kickstarters, where the money is made is these expansions because they're overpriced for what you're actually getting. But as was with Pantheon, you can imagine that a lot of these bigger box ones are just not available secondhand. I mean, I still see people like scalping the Hera expansion from Pantheon for like 100, 120 bucks. So Ragnar Saga, I'm not familiar with that at all. That one, if anything, looks a little bit like a pass to me. So that would be my biggest concern, is I don't really want something like this, but the all-in pledge might be a little cheaper to do. This looks absolutely cool. That is the Big Serpent. I'm not going to try and pronounce that again, but just fantastic. And that is just like the one god thing. And this is the Titan size ones. And these are cert 20 bucks. Nighthawk, 20 bucks. But can you pass on things like that? That just looks freaking fantastic, right? And the sleeves. And so there you go. And some astute backers said, yeah, you've got the little symbol here for the Egyptian. So yeah, and it's already been rumored, it's already been sort of confirmed, I think, as well, that the third saga in this, set of pantheons is going to be the Egyptian deities. So in case 2 of these were not enough, it's going to be a third probably 3 or 4 years from now. So you can have like a whole calyx and a half full of mythic battles, right? Artbook, don't care about terrain. They talk about some of the changes down here and the runes and the absorptions. Here are some of the videos that you need to look at if you're interested. So some of the bigger guys all got videos on that here and across the pond. And shipping's going to be what shipping's going to be. I mean, this is massive. So, you're going to pay 50 bucks for the Yggdrasil pledge, which $50 is probably about right for that. And obviously, as you go down, some of these are massive. Holy cow. But it's pretty comparable, especially even Europe. Your United States is actually on the higher end of things for some of these mainstream countries where a lot of the pledges are coming from. So it is what it is. So that is my quick synopsis, of Mythic Battles Ragnarok. I'm in. Are you in? Check it out. Next up is Scrumpy Card Cider. And I talked about this last week. It's a deck manipulation game where you're using your cards, your apples, and your wood to make cider and barrels and manipulate that and to be able to make the most profit. And it's done in sort of a Euro style mechanism with the cards. It's gonna fund. It's already almost at its funding goal. It's 80% of the way there in less than a day. And it's a 1 to 4 player, like I said, deck manipulation style game. And this is one of those games where I've heard people talking about it a little bit online already in terms of the rumbling of that, okay, do not judge a book by its cover, because this is one of those games where I think you might initially look at the cover of things and be like, oh, well, this design doesn't look super pleasing to the eye, therefore I'm just going to pass. No, I mean, this is one of those where you really probably want to take a look at the actual gameplay, because it's different, because it's taking sort of a deck building manipulation Euro style element to things with some of your workers as cards. And so that's why it's a little bit different, and that's why you should probably take a look at it, especially if you like the combination of cards as well as worker placement. Now, again, that is not me, but if that is you, if you are looking at things like Dune Imperium, if you are looking at Lost Ruins of Arnok, if you are looking at Endless Winter, maybe this is akin to those in that sense. Now, done in a different way, but it might tickle your fancy quite the same. They actually reached out to me prior to the campaign and said, hey, would you like to talk about this? Can you do a review copy? And you guys know me at this point. If it's not going to be of super interest, and this is more Euro style, I said, thanks, but no thanks. But regardless of my own personal interest, I think this is a project worth talking about, and I'm going to talk about it. And I think it gets the attention that it deserves right now. And you should be checking it out just because it is doing things in a slightly different way, especially with the element of things like the multi-use cards that we see that are probably one of the underused mechanics when it comes to mechanics overall in some games. And because this is a smaller publisher, I mean, stretch goals are probably true stretch goals. And so you just need to check it out. It's, again, nothing I'm going to be backing, but there's enough video, again, out there from this side of things and how to play that there should be no issue whatsoever, and there's no shortage of videos, that it should be something of you knowing what you're getting into if you like it. And so these are sort of the three things that you can do during your turn. You can sell cider, you can do a secondary action that all your workers have the ability to do, or you can sell one of your resources. So again, at the core, it's more of a worker action style type game, but with cards in order to do it. And again, I like the presentation. I wish this was, again, up at the top. So you had this up at the top. But again, marketing what it is what it is. So there you go. Oh, there's even a solo mode for those of you guys who are looking at it. So what's the price point here? Okay. Let's see. Okay. So $46. That's a little bit more expensive than I would have guessed. I would have guessed high 30s for this. But I mean, that's not horrible. And double backer gets you 91. Okay, so it saves you a $1. But I mean, 46 plus shipping. This is probably not one that's also going to be at wide distribution. So I wouldn't be surprised if that you were really looking at it. You might want to be picking it up now versus later. But this is also one of those gamble ones. Like, if it actually is as good as it potentially could be, I could easily see this one getting picked up as well. So it just kind of depends what happens post-production and how successful it is on Kickstarter in the first place. But again, no question that it's going to fund. It's just whether or not it's for you, as always. Next up is Bone to Pick. Now, I got alerted to this because I recently got their previous game from Peter Horniak of Ausonia. I just received that probably within the last 2 weeks or so. I have yet to get to the table, but I'm definitely going to be playing it soon. And this is within one of their previous IP universes, and this is a semi-cooperative, self-described party game with multiple modes. So what are you doing in this game? Now, I mentioned the fact that this is a semi-cooperative game, and this reminds me, honestly, when I'm reading through the rulebook here, a little bit of Cutthroat Caverns, in the sense that you are competing together, unified, against a common threat, but you are also trying to do the most damage and to be the one that gets the most points, all while not losing at the same time. And how you're doing that is you have two of these types of cards that you're going to be utilizing. One are the monsters that you're going to be killing and the amount of damage that they need to do. And you can see that it scales each monster depending on the number of players. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be playing down one of these weapons that each have value. And so everybody lays a card down, you total up the value, and if you defeat the monster, great. If you don't, well, you all take damage. You all start also with the same 12 weapon cards, with strengths anywhere from 0 to 10. How do you get points? Well, if you play the highest card of that round, you get the points from the monster that you defeated. Now, the tricky thing is, if you duplicate with somebody else, yours cancel each other out, and so the next highest unique number is the one that gets the points. So you have to very carefully plan because you know what other people can play, and you know what other people have already played, so you have to think about it from that side of things too. Now, the tricky part is there are a couple 0 cards in here as well. Zeros can never win trophies. Obviously, there is a twist because you just can't be playing high numbers all the time, so at some point you have to play low numbers and hope that it's not when other people play low numbers as well, because your haven, the stronghold that you're defending only has 3 hit points, and if you ever take all 3 of those hit points as lost, you lose immediately, everybody. So then obviously at the end of the game, you total up who has the most points, and there you go. Now they also have a campaign element that has 4 rounds of these 10 individual tricks of each round. And then you can have the winner. You can also have the scapegoat in case you lose, who has the most value from the cards left that they didn't play, you know, because they were hoarding all their good stuff. Now they also, I won't go into it in any more detail, but there's an epic game for up to 7 or 12 players if you want to truly make this a party game. So what do I think? Okay, let's take a look at the pledge levels here, and I'll let you know a little bit more. Okay, $30 is the core with the stretch goals. $42 gets you the expansion as well, and the early bird expansion with the comic book for $42. Okay, that's great. And you can get the double copy for up to 12 people. So, I mean, it's another spin. Like I said, it reminds me very heavily of Cutthroat Caverns, and again, that's a game that's very divisive, but it doesn't look as interesting to me as Cutthroat Caverns did, just with the variability of Cutthroat Caverns versus this. I understand it, but it just doesn't seem to be appealing for me. I think I would be hard-pressed to choose this over Cutthroat Caverns because I am more of a fantasy rather than a seafaring monster type of person when it comes to theme anyway. And Cutthroat Caverns is already out there with expansions and sort of a proven commodity. Now, you can argue that it's not the best proven commodity. There are definitely better games. There are definitely worse games. But it's known. And sometimes 1 in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, as I say. So that's definitely something to think about too. So all in all, I think you should check it out if you like that sort of game. And I do like that sort of game with a little bit of Cutthroat, with a little bit of Take That, with a little bit of Chaos. So it's definitely my style, but I just don't see myself actually picking it up just by the nature of it. So that is bone to pick. Next up is Liquid Squid, right? Hyperspace Kraken! Anyway, the battle for Neo Tokyo. And I saw this one on my list, but it really didn't get announced, I think, date-wise until relatively recently. So it sort of flew under the radar last week for me. It's sort of this cyberpunk worker placement style game, as you can sort of see here with some of the pictures. You are a super hacker vigilante trying to defend against a supervillain. It is, as they describe, a game within a game. So you have 2 separate sort of sections of the game, sort of like if you were watching Burn Cycle from Chip Theory games earlier, where you've got sort of one aspect of the game over here and then another aspect of the game over here, then you're managing both. That's how it describes it here, is you have sort of these 2 different battle arenas, the streets and then the close quarter combat sort of one-shot scenarios. Now, I've criticized other people for doing so, but I'm going to give them some kudos here because they do talk about what the game is doing higher up on the page than a lot of the other campaigns that are out there. But the problem is when I'm reading through this, I mean, it's giving me sort of this high-level view without some of the detail that I need. Okay, 3 districts. Okay, there's landmarks and points of interest that you're going to be going through. And it says, you know, they have their own deck. And when you point of interest is destroyed, you can't draw street cards. Well, what are street cards? What do street cards do? I have no clue. So it's throwing things in there just a little bit too soon for me to understand some of those concepts. Because is it a big deal if street cards are gone or not? I just don't know yet. And again, 2 block locations, and they cut off the areas of interest until they're disposed. Well, how big of a deal is that? How does that happen? How do I fix that? There's not a lot of that little nuanced detail that I need to know, okay, what do I do with this information that you're telling me? How does it actually shape the actual gameplay when it comes down to it? I mean, they're just talking about what you're going to see on this board and a little bit of how it works. Okay, that's talking about some of the symbology there. You get a little bit bigger picture of the overall board in terms of the bigger and the smaller picture. They talk about one of their systems, the gank rating. Okay, take that for what it is. Some of the landmark scenarios that they talk about, and then a balanced dance, as I mentioned above, between physical combat and hacking. A little bit of what you're getting now in terms of the cards. Here's the base pledge. $49 is probably a pretty decent price. You get the 2 expansions that for an additional $19 there. Neoprene mat for another $19. It talks now a little bit about the factions that are in the game itself. What's in the box? Okay, how to play. Okay, this is going to be more useful. And then some gameplay here. So this is the stuff that's really going to be more useful because I feel like these just aren't as helpful as I would like, even though I like seeing that at the top of the page. And again, they've got plenty of videos here. Ooh, in the rule book as well. And I like this theme. I am a big fan of cyberpunk. So anything cyberpunk is going to get me to click on it and look at it with a little bit more detail than I'd like to admit. And the rule book does a better job than the page in terms of outlining some of the nuances that I was just sort of questioning and wondering about. So it's there. It definitely gives you more of a sense of this. Okay, because like I mentioned, the streets. Okay, here's what happens with the streets. Here is what happens. Here is what you need to be aware of. Here's what you need to know. Why is it important? Why are the scenarios and the landmarks important? Okay, this is the detail that you need. And the problem is, I mean, you can see all the text on here. There's a lot of text, and so that's why you probably didn't see a lot of that on the page itself. But if you can't explain it, don't be throwing things in either to sort of confuse people as well. I guess a little bit less sometimes is more. All in all, it's an interesting project. It's an interesting twist on things. I have not watched the gameplay, and I have not read the rules completely here, so I can't really give you a good sense of how it actually plays yet. But this is definitely, again, like I said, this is a unique theme. I love the cyberpunk theme. I love the hacking theme. I don't think we have too many good hacking games out there apart from the obvious, you know, Android Netrunner, which is now, it's not dead, but it's secondhand being produced, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I like this aspect of things. I just don't know, because I didn't see a whole lot more out there before this game launched, how this is going to do. This is definitely something that's flying under the radar, and with a little bit of fine-tuning and a little bit of cleaning up and a little bit more promotion, I think you could probably see a good result. And this is one that I would say, if the gameplay looks relatively solid and this doesn't fund, I think this is one where you make some of those changes and it could probably fund in the future, because I think it's got the makings of something solid there. It's just, I just don't know, like I said. So watch the gameplay if it interests you. I will be taking a look later today or tomorrow as well. So there you go. Liquid Squid. Battle for Neo Tokyo. Check it out. Hyperspace Kraken! Next up is Terra Proxima. This is a space game where you are trying to get to aforementioned Terra Proxima in the center of the map. This reminds me a little bit, if you've heard of the game of Gravwell, where you're gradually circling trying to get in. Now this takes it in a different direction and it changes some of the mechanics, but it reminds me very much of that, because what you're doing in this is you're using a little bit of a push your luck with resource management in a 2-phase turn, trying to be the first ship to get to the center. And there's a 3 to 6 player element, which makes it a little bit broader than some of the other games we've seen. Now you can see with this hex-based map, where you start is in these outer edges. See if I can get a little bigger picture here. At the white dots, and you're spaced out according to how many numbers there are. Like I mentioned, there's a production phase and then an action phase. In production phase, obviously, is going to be where the resources are coming in, and the action phase is where you're going to be spending them to do various activities. You start out having to repair your ship in one of several various ways in order to make it towards the center, and you're going to have to go to certain places in order to get the resources, and go to certain places in order to get repaired, and gradually becoming closer and closer. There are things like asteroids and wormholes that you're going to try to be taking advantage of in order to help you along the way. Your actions are going to be including things like moving, trading, building, and attacking. And especially that last one in a game like this, people may or may not like, depending on how you feel about Take That. But more as a disclaimer, the attacking does include an element of dice rolling with some mitigation. So again, if you're not a fan of either one of those, this might be a pass in terms of looking at it from your own personal style side of things. Here you go. You can see a little bit better of the board and what it entails, with the different color spots representing different areas, even having a little bit of an asteroid belt going all around sort of an inner ring right there. You get a little bit of the meeples and the tokens and the glossary. There's a full rules on the page as well that I looked at. It's about 10, 12 pages, but the concerning thing to me was that they, again, like some other games, they're using a lot of their own terminology. So like the last 4 or 5 pages, I think, are glossary terms. So depending on how intuitive they are, hopefully they're relatively self-explanatory, but I always get a little concerned when you have that many terms that need to be defined. But I'm rather over, I guess, than under-define those at the same time. You can try it out on both of the online simulations. You can see another bit of a review from Father Geek here. And it's kind of flying under the radar. I don't think you see as much of a high production quality just with sort of the graphic design as opposed to with any other games. And so I think that might be in part why it's flying a little bit under the radar right now. And I didn't see anything about this one prior to launch. So we'll see how it does. It's about 10% of its funding goal right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if this just needs a few small tweaks like a couple other campaigns that I've seen in the last couple of weeks. And just because the competition is so stiff, it needs something to set itself apart. And the going to the center is unique, but space is unfortunately not. So it's something interesting. Ultimately, though, I think it's a game that I'm just mystified a little bit at times because I can't always give a concrete reason about why it seems like some games like this fund and other games don't. There just doesn't always seem to be a unifying factor or not. So we'll see what happens, but there you go. Terra Promixa. Next up is the second printing of Board Royale. Now, if this sort of genre, if this sort of color scheme and artistic direction reminds you of something, well, it's probably PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which is a multiplayer battle royale originally on the video game side of things. This is kind of like the tabletop equivalent. And honestly, I didn't even know about this game before I checked it out, and I didn't even know this was a second printing of it, but they're putting out new expansions, and as you can kind of see here, a little bit of everything. Skills, missions, more weapons, zombies, and some hunting. So a little bit of more layers to this game. So what is it? I mean, it's a survival take that card style game where you play until only one person remains. It describes itself as a sandbox style of game, and it can be played in many different ways as they talk about. They're adding more of a collaborative and peaceful side of things. I don't really know how that translates into a last man standing sort of King of the Hill style game, but we'll kind of see, I guess. Here's all of what you're getting. So what did they change? Okay, more items to increase the base count, more weapons, more disguises, more balanced experience. So maybe one of the biggest critiques is a balance issue with the base game. That's a little... Okay, sure. I'm glad you're balancing it second time around, right? And that's, I guess, for all those that are proponents of, I'm not going to back it the first time around, I'm going to back it the second time because the second iteration always has some improvements. Well, you may be right on this one. So, what are you doing? How do you play? Put the decks, open on the table, gather resources, make items, use them, run out of resources, you die. Okay. There you go. 10-second summary, right? So this is a really interesting take on things. I wasn't sure what quite to expect when I opened up the rulebook, just based on the description, but it really is solely a card-driven game. Now, it's got a little bit of luck, but it definitely has some take that as well. So depending on how you feel about that, but it seems like the overhead is relatively low because, like I said, the rules are relatively straightforward. You draw cards, you've got this middle crafting field in the middle where these are the items that you can craft on any given turn. You resource stack in your item deck. So what you're doing on your turn is you're just drawing resources and then crafting something if you can. Rinse and repeat. Now the caveat and the slight twist there is you can draw 2 resources from the deck, a la, sort of like the mystery ones from Ticket to Ride, if you will, when you're drawing off there. Or you can steal a random resource from someone else. So depending on how much take that you want, there you go. Then when you make one of these items in the middle, you replace it. Rinse, repeat, you use the items. When you craft an item, you set it out in front of you so that everyone can see it. Now, there are different types of items depending on what they are. Okay, types. Yellows are permanent, greens are temporary, and blues are escape items. And if you get enough escape items, you win immediately. They also have a little bit of reference just in the upper right-hand corner so you can see all the different types of items. So somebody just glancing over can see, okay, is this a one-time use item? Is this a support item? Is this something that you're going to attack me with in the future? What do I need to know if I can't read all the text just by a quick glance? All of your terminology here, relatively straightforward. And then how do you attack? As you saw, that upper right-hand corner had a cost, so you have to pay the cost potentially depending on what it is. The defender has a chance to use a card to be able to react to it, and then the damage resolves. Now, the attack, the damage that is done is the amount of resources or cards that they lose. And like it said at the beginning, if you have no resources, you're out. You lose. Last one standing wins. Boom. Rinse, repeat. There you go. They give an example, they give a couple rules, they give a couple other things in here, so it's relatively straightforward. Okay, now that we've seen that, let's check it out. Survival 101, $26. This gets a second print plus the exclusives expansion pack. 300 cards for $26. That's relatively good. I'll give them credit. That is a good price for that side of things. But you only see 24 people there out of how many so far? 985. So there must be something else in here that we need to know about. Returning Survivor. You get the update, the box, and all of the expansions. Okay, 620. And then the new Survivor. So you're getting the base game and all of the new stuff as well. And that's where a bunch of them are. The Ultimate Survivor. Ooh, this one. Wow. And this is everything. 700 plus cards, $91. This strikes me very much as the previous game from like a month or so ago of Doomlings. One, I think that would be fun to play, but until I played it and sort of saw the amount of interaction and take that, I just don't know if it would be for me. Like the overhead and the getting to the table part, I think is really easy, and that's really appealing. The design is relatively aesthetically pleasing in the simplicity. Like I'm a big fan of simplicity when it comes to this, and there's a lot of intuition. The replayability with 900 cards, good gosh, obviously is there. Now, do you need all of these? Do I want zombies? Do I want not suitable for work? Do I want some of that stuff? Probably not. So I definitely don't think I would get the 91. I'd probably get somewhere like the 60 right here, which would be worth it. And that would be something that I would look at. Now, I'm not sure, because like they say, with that many cards, and as they mentioned at the top, balance. Because that is the trickiest part in a game like this is, are you definitively going to have things that are just that much more powerful when you've got that plethora and you're trying to make that much difference in all of them? And so that would be my biggest concern. Let's see what else we got. Okay, so it just kind of runs through some of the expansions and some of the missions that you can do. You can add in skills expansions, new character classes. So just adding a whole lot. And I guess the other concern I would have with all of these expansions is sort of like the game I always think of when I think of adding expansions is Isle of Skye, if you're familiar with that, the tile-laying, auction, bidding, placement game. And the first expansion really takes it from what it was and makes it just not as good and too long and just too much for what it's trying to be. Whereas the second expansion just adds more goodness to it without adding the increased difficulty and complexity in a not so great way. And that would be my concern with some of these is, okay, some more of these are good, but like I mentioned, if you're playing this game because it's quick and intuitive and it's highly replayable, are you adding in so much overhead with all of these texts and abilities that you have like 6 things in front of you? Can you remember them all? Can you time them all appropriately? Are you going to remember when to do what, or who's got that over there because you've never seen that card even though you've played 20 times and you just don't know what it does? You know, there's a little bit of a good thing sometimes to be said of the meta, but I like the idea of this game in general. I like the idea of this because this is something I could definitely play with my kids, or I could probably play it as a light filler game for my group with 3 or 4 people, where we're not looking for something heavy and just something, okay, I can just get this and play this, and I don't have a lot of overhead going on up here if it's been a long day or a long week. So I like it. I like it. Especially at the price point, it seems relatively good for what it is. And exclusivity, which means you're going to be more wanting to get it here as opposed to waiting. So yeah, I definitely would say check this one out. This is one of those that, honestly, I did not think I would have any appeal when I first saw this. But now that I checked it out, it's definitely going to be something that I'm going to click Remind Me on and see what happens at, wow, a month later. There you go. Board Royale, 2nd edition. Next up, Vowl, the game of letters gone astray. It's a twist on the word-taking Scrabble-esque type game. It is already almost 80% of the way funded. So what are you doing? You're trying to figure out, with a race against time, to recognize in the database that they have compiled 400 words that have had the vowels removed. Haha, removed. There, see? And you're just doing it in one of 3 different modes. And so it's more of a puzzle game and more of a recognition game, depending on how you're doing it. Solo, partner, head-to-head. So there you go. That's what it is. And how you do it is just straightforward. $24 each. And shipping in the US is free. So that's a relatively good price. as I've said in the past, word games are definitely not for me. I've tried them. I have not found them to be terribly fun for me. But if you're the Scrabble, Bananagrams type of person, word scramble on the Sunday paper, this is probably a definite game up your alley. And it is, I mean, it's different than anything I've seen. And I think the advertisements I've seen is, oh, I can't believe nobody thought of this before. And that is, looking at it now, that is very true. I would say that is exactly what I would expect of a game like this. So that's it. That's it. Boom, there you go. I can see why it's at where it's at. It's probably going to fund, and we'll see what else they do with it. So there you go, Vowl. Now, with these videos, you know, I try and keep them mostly on topic, pretty close to the tabletop board game scene. I try not to diverge too much or too often, but I mean, this is an upgrade kit. And this is, I mean, wooden meeples for all of your favorite games and upgrades, and they have what it says is 25 now games in their library, essentially, that you can upgrade. And so I think it's just worth mentioning. Now, me, again, I am not on the, for the most part, deluxeification side of the hobby. I'm just not. I look at this always when I see this as, I could be spending this money on a new game. But I understand the counter argument that I don't really need another new game. I have plenty of games to play. Why not make one of my games that I love that much better and more appealing? So I understand where it is coming from that standpoint, and it looks like they're trying to hit on all the hotness of stuff that's not even out. Creature Comforts, Darwin's Journey, well, Scythe, I mean, that's been around for a little bit. Obsession, just recently delivered. Concordia, Bonfire, Taverns, Feast for Odin. I mean, just all names that you're going to be recognizing if you're familiar with half of the hotness or half of the classics. So just a solid collection, solid interest. I like that. But that's a lot of money though, right? 127 piece set for $88. Now, $88 is more than just one game, right? Okay. So anyway, if this interests you, and I know there's a lot of you guys out there, just check it out. You know, it's quality product. They've done a few other Kickstarters in the past. So what you see is what you get. And sometimes it's worth paying for quality. So check it out. Now, next up is one of my more enjoyable publishers, just because I happen to own a few things of theirs. And that is Level 99 Games. And this is the reprint of Spells and Steam from 2020. And what they're doing here is they are doing a reprint with the deluxe edition, but they are doing and following the Kickstarter rules of having to have something new, and the new is the Far Corners mini expansion. Now, again, I'm actually a little bit shocked that this isn't funded, but they're also probably going for a true funding goal so that they can have a larger print run and supply at retail, would be my guess. Because I believe it was relatively very low stock or even sold out at the retail level from the deluxe side of things. And I don't even know, but maybe even the regular side of things. If you're not familiar with Empyreal Spells and Steam, it is a fantasy-esque, steampunk-themed pick up and deliver with trains. And there's a few keywords in there that people are either going to be turned off by or turned on by. Because this is a different take on the train genre. There is significant route building, and the deluxeification, as you can see here, really emphasizes a lot of the upgraded components, the upgraded quality, and just the pieces, as we just saw, similar to that, essentially, pieces Kickstarter. And I think part of the challenge is that this is not a cheap game at the deluxe level, and that's what kind of turned me off the first time it launched on Kickstarter, because I'm also not necessarily the biggest train guy, and I'm not the biggest... In fact, I'm very low on pickup and delivers. It just doesn't click well. But that's what this game is. And the base game with the mini expansion is going to cost you $69. And that's my biggest issue when it comes to level 99 is I have not found that this basic pledge level is often a good value compared to the retail side of things. But when you start going for the non-retail side of things with the more exclusive stuff, just with the expansions and the deluxe upgrades. So if you only bought the base game at retail, it's going to cost you to get everything else $109 more. And that's not insignificant, right? $119 gets you just the base game and the 2 expansions. That's not even deluxeifications yet, folks. But it gives you, I mean, I don't know anyone who's going to play this with 7 and 8 players, but it gives you that ability, and I guess more probably 7th and 8th options to choose as one of the regular players. And then $159 gets you that deluxeification on top. So the value of the deluxeification is $40 additional. And then everything is going to be $259, including all of these massive extra trains. So you can see, I mean, yes, you're paying for what you get. I mean, the quality is impeccable. It's unquestioned. But do you need it? I mean, that's really the issue. And so that was my big question, because honestly, I didn't know what the deluxeification was going to look like. I didn't really pay, like I said, close attention the first time around. So what are you doing? You're choosing who you want to be. You're expanding your network, and you're delivering. I mean, just like I said, you're upgrading how you're going to be able to do it, in what manner, and you're trying just to be the first to be able to do so. Now, just like with a lot of these route building games, what happens with this game is that you may be the first one to get somewhere and get the benefits from that, but depending on how the conditions change within the game, because they will, apparently, getting there first may ultimately also cost you more resources when other people can sort of maybe potentially use that route after the conditions change, and you may be a little bit on the downside or may have some trouble because of that. So it's a risk-reward type of situation. And here you can see, like I said, here are the pledge levels that it kind of goes through. So extra trains, another $40, and then poster collection and Grand Chronicle. So what are you actually getting? So this is just the base game, so all of the usual stuff. Here's the expansion that adds a whole bunch more of good stuff. And, you know, 11.99 games is great at that. You know, BattleCon, Millennium Blades, the more is never the issue. They're very good from that side of things. So the question is, though, what is the deluxe upgrade kit, and is it worth getting? Because, like I mentioned, I know that it's at a decent discount based on the retail price that I saw from their web shop, because this is also one that does not get wide distribution at the usual places. Game Nerds, Miniature Market, Cool Stuff, whatever your personal choice of venue of buying games from online is. And so what are you getting? You're getting these heavier folios. You're getting all of the chipboards that's embossed with the logos. You're getting molded resources, and you're getting these travel postcards along with an art book. So I really thought it was going to be something else. And honestly, from that side of things, I probably have to pass, because as I just said with the previous page, I mean, this is almost a perfect segue. I wish I'd almost planned it. It's great, but I'm not that smart. So that would just be my concern, is I don't have a huge invested interest in this side of things. So for me, I would be looking at, you know, potentially this, and $69 is probably a decent deal for those two. It's just, would I actually get it played, and what is the shipping going to cost me, and is this my type of game at all? Because I really don't know. I have not looked at it that much, but I think price point wise, you're getting a big bang for your buck, right? I mean, it compares it to the Suburbia Collector's Edition. It compares it to the size of Gloomhaven, and this is a large box. This is a large box. So what you're getting for the money is unquestionable, but whether or not you're getting what's right for you for the money is a whole nother topic altogether. And like I said, some of those mechanics aren't exactly ones that I am terribly comfortable with, so this would be a stretch for me. This would be high on the try it before I buy it, because I just don't know. And that's about it. And they go through the shipping, which is, you know, about usual. For the size of the box, that's actually pretty good for most places, actually. So that's actually anticipated, if those are right, pretty good. But that's why it is back on Kickstarter. And I mean, I believe it's going to fund, but I'd be interesting to see what happens if they don't fund. Like, are they going to change the price point of the funding goal, or what happens? I don't know, because they're a relatively established company, and they don't use Kickstarter for everything. They sort of have a retail and a Kickstarter side of things, like several of these, I don't want to say larger companies, because they're definitely not a large one, but more well-rounded and well-known in terms of putting stuff out on both sides. They definitely are. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And you can see, I've already got it saved so that I can check it out at the very end. So next up is AuZtralia, the big box, as well as expansions for the base game in the first place. And this is basically a Euroized, if you will, appreciate that term, Cthulhu game with a little bit of the pick up and deliver that I just mentioned before with Empyreal. And it is not exactly a train fully building game, but you are building routes to explore Australia, and you're finding ancient mysteries in the old ones and having to deal with the threat that comes along with that while mining resources and managing your forces. And the interesting aspect of this game is the old one becomes an active player alongside of you. So what are you getting with this new expansion? The Revenge of the Old Ones, and I love the idea of this game, but again, as I just mentioned with Empyreal, the pick up and deliver and more of the worker-esque placement style just does not suit me. And so this is one of those games, again, where I would have to try it before I buy it. And frankly, it's more of a pass just because I'd be concerned that I like the idea of it more than I like the practicality of it. But this game is relatively well thought of. The other difference is that this is a relatively cooperative game. So when the old ones wake up, you're having to fight them off. Now, what this expansion does is it allows one person to take over the bad guys. So it becomes one versus all. And again, that is a very divisive mechanic because some people like myself really like that, other people don't. And so now you've got me a little bit more intrigued. And if you're really interested, it looks like it's not super hard to get. It looks like there are some copies on the secondary market, so you can probably check it out if you really want to before this campaign ends, instead of just being forced to get it during this campaign as well. So let's take a look at the pledge levels here for a second. Big box with 2 expansions. That's the lowest pledge level, so you can only get it there. And that is without the base game. Okay, you can put it all in there, but that doesn't include the base game. And then otherwise, so I guess if you want the base game, you're either getting it all or you're picking the base game up in the secondary market beforehand. So depending on what you can get the base game for, that's a $40 difference. And you can see that most of these are going to run about 40 plus with shipping, at least in my market. So that's interesting. That's pretty close, actually, comparatively. And the question would be, if these are retail and don't have the promos, you may be better off going here because you're going to get all the promo cards and the other daily milestones, whereas you might not get them with the other ones. So dual map expansion, 1 to 2 players or 2 to 3. Fixed resources and then random resources, and they've got rulebooks up. So I mean, there's enough out there for the base game. You can see all of these big names all have comments and reviews and opinions on it, and it all seems relatively positive. I just, those mechanics just worry me a little bit, because I think it is a little bit, as you can see here, heavy cardboard. I think it is a little bit of a heavier game. Let's see, what is the heaviness? So 2.93 on Board Game Geek, which isn't bad. And so I just don't know. I'm probably going to have to watch some gameplay on this because, you know, I just don't know enough about the actual turn-by-turn basis, and I haven't read through the rulebook yet. So if any of you guys have opinions out there on this, as, you know, a fellow co-op lover, is this going to be too heavy for me? Is this going to be easy enough? Am I going to like it if I'm not a fan of route building and necessarily the pick up and deliver style type of games? I'd be interested to hear what you guys say on that as well. And you see a couple of the other games that they're offering. Here's shipping. Okay, shipping's a little bit more expensive than a few of the other campaigns, but not totally unreasonable either. $30 plus 99, so you're looking at $140 essentially. You're looking at probably about $130 for the new recruit big box and getting everything. And that's probably the way I'd go. I don't think I would probably go for the lesser, even if you could piecemeal it a little bit. So, other languages. And there you go. That is AuZtralia with a Z, plus the 2 expansions, Tasmania and Revenge of the Old Ones. I need to watch myself a bunch of gameplay videos this weekend. What are you doing? I'm apparently doing this. Xenohunters. I previewed this one a couple weeks ago when I thought it was coming out, and then it kind of flew under the radar. And now it has come out, and it is an all-woman team of galactic mercenaries fighting off aliens. And they're 150% of their funding goal, which is only 5,000, but still, for a game that was relatively under the radar, that's pretty good. So, okay, so what are you doing? Like I said, I believe this is hidden movement, if I'm remembering correctly. And you're trying to figure out exactly what the alien is trying to do and trying to fight off the alien. Yep, hidden movement, here we go. Hunter, you have one alien that is sneaking in and out of the grid, and there are a whole set of rules for that. And then you have sort of the alien-esque theme with your shipyard that you're moving around in, trying to either be the hunter or be the hunted. With a lot of these space-type games, there is the ability of, I don't want to say corruption, but you can recruit one of the players over to your own side, sort of like, was it Dead Alone? Or something, one of those space-type games where you can infect them and then turn them to their side and have them betray. And so you have that mechanism as well in this game. And that's a relatively divisive mechanic of being able to turn someone against their teammates in the middle of a game and backstab. That's some people don't like that. I personally, again, don't have a problem with it, but I think it adds an interesting, unique mechanic and an interesting, unique level of paranoia in a fun way. But anyway, so different missions, different achievements that you're doing on these missions, trying to eradicate those aliens. And here you go, full rule set. So that's nice. Look, just like a couple of the others I've talked about on here, this is not going to win the best aesthetic or the best graphic design. But if your gameplay matches it, it makes up for sometimes graphic design that is less. And that's okay. Because graphic design oftentimes is just a way to get people in. Without going into too much details of the rule book, which is about 22 pages long, you basically get, like I said, it's a 1v all, an Alien versus Hunter-esque style hidden movement game. Very similar in nature to several of the other hidden movement games out there, like the Lord of the Rings one, or the one from Plaid Hat Games with the sci-fi theme that I'm completely blanking on, obviously. And stretch goals, which are probably true stretch goals given the campaign here. And let's see, expansions. You can get a couple expansions. Now, are those included? I can't really tell. Base game is $38. Okay, that's about what I would have guessed. Tactical Commander gets you that expansion, so that's what, $15 additional. And the second expansion is another $8. Choose your adventure card game set. Okay. And getting some of the other games too. Okay. There you go. Xenohunters. Another interesting take. And I think, again, speaking of games like this, it's especially with hidden movement, it's a niche within a niche. And if you make it good, the people who really enjoy that type of game will support it. And I think that's what you're seeing here. So if that seems like Alien crossed with Nemesis, crossed with hidden movement like Letters in Whitechapel, maybe you should check this out. Xenohunters. Next up is Arena Colossei. They're at about 15% of their funding goal right now. And this is more of a 1v1 skirmish style Colosseum, ancient Rome type game where you have different characters and different abilities and you're upgrading them on a hex-based grid to be the last one standing. If you're seeing this within the first 72 hours, you're getting a free dice tower. And that's based off of the first dice tower ever. If you actually look this up, this is actually like true from a Roman artifact. I mean, this story is real. You can Google it and see. And this is what you're getting. And for 70 euros, that's expensive for a skirmish game. And you're getting the board, 6 miniatures, 6 bases, all these indicators. Now, the problem I think that this is running into is you're running up against one of the other biggest skirmish games in the industry with Mythic Battles. And it's got an established pedigree. And for, let's see, what is 70 euros here? $84 for essentially $35 more. You're getting all of the core plus the huge stretch goal box of Mythic. And that's a hard thing to compete with. And now I'm not saying it's a direct competitor, but when you're looking at skirmish style games, the market is not as saturated as skirmish 1v1 type card dueling games, but it's akin to that. And so I guess the definite difference here is obviously the theme, and it definitely is different with the gladiator side of things, but is it enough to really set it apart? You have 6 different asymmetric heroes that have different abilities and different strengths and different weaknesses, all with different stats that you can choose from. And then you also have different animals that will engage as well in the Colosseum, because if that's what happened in the Colosseum, right? A few stretch goals, dice, obstacles, and new characters. A few previews and reviews down here with a tutorial, and a few more comments and quotes. So there you go. That is Arena Colossei. And again, it's going up at the wrong time against one of the biggest games that's out there. And I think people are getting their fill. I have not looked at the gameplay. I have not looked at the rule book to see, as they mention here, the innovative gameplay and what sets them apart. But if this theme appeals to you, I would say check it out, because it's sometimes really hard to tell what makes the difference in these games. And what they say here, and to set it apart, is this is much more tactical. The grid and the maneuvering really matters in this game, and you can make an argument that in a lot of the other 2-player asymmetrical skirmish type games, it isn't always as important. And the abilities sometimes matter more, and how you combine the abilities rather than that, and this looks more like the maneuvering plays a stronger role. I just don't know. it just clearly isn't clicking with people for whatever reason. And like I said, I think part of that is the comparisons that are out there, and it's going up against this stiff competition. So we'll see. It's also got a little bit relatively higher funding goal. Is that affecting things? Who knows? But the theme is different. The mechanics seem different. The grid style is different. So if it interests you, check it out. So next up, we have Space Plague, which I mentioned last week as well. This is a 2 to 4 player civilization-esque conquering game using one of 4 species, teams, divisions, however you want to call them, to try and conquer the galaxy. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to guide your troops, your soldiers, through planets and planetary defenses, through hand management and hand building in order to conquer the most planets. And as by the game title, you're basically a self-inflicting plague on these planets. So here's what you're getting. You can see a little bit of everything there. The 4 different colors and the 4 different factions, if you will. And then Rado, how to play. And here you see just a little bit of a quick summary. Using the planetary decks, using your action cards, carrying out the event cards, and then advancing your units 1 space forward. Again, just as a side note really quick, I like this. This is what I want to see on a Kickstarter page. I want to see right at the top, how do I play, a quick summary, a little bit more detailed summary, then you can show me, the other stuff. And, yes, there's a little bit of stuff here, but there's not a huge amount. And they say, okay, look at the stretch goals later. And that's fine. Now, I'll say straight off, looking at the stretch goals here, player aids should not be a stretch goal. I mean, that's an essential. So, yes, I know you want to have that, but if you want to get people really interested in your game, I should not be having to guess how to play. I don't want to be having to try and explain when you have a card that you can just hand out so that people can remember, so it reduces the AP as well. And they've got a couple other stretch goals showing here: factions, more cards, player tokens. Yes, all of the nice accoutrements that you would want. More new stuff of everything. Okay, a couple videos, including a Rado, but let's go back to the rules for a second. This is not a big rule book. 12 pages with the first and the last, and usually even the first 2 here, just with components and cover. So less than 10 pages, not a complex game, but as you saw with some of the quotes, they're talking about some of the hidden depth or the hidden strategy that might not be first apparent. So this is a better illustration of what the game actually entails with the 4 phases. And you can see 7 here being the planetary track that you are tracking out, trying to get to the core of in the first place. And this is the core in the middle. So here is just a nice, simple overview. This is what it's producing in the upper left. This is what is going on in the bottom of the event phase down here. Then you get all of the energy that is splayed out of these that are showing during that phase. So gradually you're going to be getting more and more per turn. Now you can see the top card on the deck, so you can start to, again, plan ahead a little bit of what to expect in terms of the planetary defenses, but also what you're going to be getting future in the terms of the energy. Here is where you're playing the cards on the opposite side, with the cards being played as the active card here, and then the evolution cards that may have a passive effect as well on this side. This is the action selection that is done simultaneously with all players playing one face down. Now, the other caveat with this game is you all start with the same deck of 6 cards and are obtaining additional cards through the marketplace with those resources that I just mentioned. You can also, in this phase, renew the market if in case, as with a lot of these cards with a relatively static market, what happens is you don't get anything you want out there, so you can change it if that does happen. Here are, I'm not going to go through this, but the 6 cards that you're getting: evolving, producing guys, or moving. Here are the evolutions that you can get that are going to have various powers. You can see the cost of resources, and you can see the type. That's very straightforward. Now here's the trick though, is when you buy these cards, it's replacing an old card in your deck. And you can see that some of these symbols down here at the bottom of these cards match up very nicely with the symbols that are seen here on the ones that you start with. So you need to be very careful in your strategy there. Planetary events, going to do different stuff. Now they don't really go into a whole lot of examples, so I can't really talk too much about that, but there's unique in general. And then, last but not least, you march out trying to get further to the core. All of your units advance 1 space. When you move forward, that's when you collect that energy that's on that tile. That's when some of these other effects take place. Whether or not they attack, whether the road is blocked, whether, you're collecting energy or not. Goes through a few of the planets, glossary, there you go. Not terribly overhead complex. A couple of videos that are easy to watch, shipping, it's cheap. So what's the actual price point? I didn't look at the pledge levels there. I didn't see that too much. So $39. Okay. For shipping, $49. It's going to be hopefully by the end of the year. Nothing to make me think in terms of production value that's going to be not achievable because it's cards and little pieces, right? And the stretch goals are what they are. So let's see. Okay. What else would we got? Plus the Chaos bundle. So you're getting 6 exclusive, that's a typo there, event cards, and you're getting a custom card. So, okay. $30 more gets you expansion and custom. Okay, I can see why people are split. I mean, I wish there was almost a third pledge level that had just the expansion and then the customization. You could probably get $60 or even $79 for. And if you made the expansion maybe $59, maybe you'd see more there. But yeah, that's expensive for 6 cards. You're getting the illustration, but I guess maybe even 6 cards maybe be $50, $45. Anyway. So there you go. That's it. That's everything. That is Spaceblade. So I usually do these in chronological order, but here is HEXplore, the domain of Mirza Noctis. And the reason it's last is, to be honest, it was one that I sort of forgot about. And like I've said in other videos, that is Gamefound's problem right now, is there's not an easy, direct way to get there, and there's not a lot of other projects that are going to make me casually look at this one on top like Kickstarter has. But that being said, the game is clearly not suffering by any means right now. I reviewed it last week. This is the 4th in the iterations of HEXplore, and they're relatively well thought of, open sandbox type RPG-esque crawling games that are very well thought of. Now, they are definitely a niche within sort of the crawling type game market, but they definitely offer something that other games don't. The variability, the theme is different in all 4 of these games. This is more of the horror-esque, more Transylvania side of things. And again, I think each of them has appealed to a different audience, but I know that people that like this game have, as a few of you have commented, that you really do enjoy this game and you're going to get many of them. And I think that's part of the detriment as well, is that there's just a lot of game in each one of these. And the other 3 campaigns, none of them was, massive. I think the largest one was about 200,000 or so in total funding. And so the fact that this is already at 168,000 speaks to people recognizing, I think, that this is a quality product and there's a reason why you're getting a 4th iteration. And or maybe people like this horror Transylvania-esque theme a little bit more than some of the other iterations with the generic fantasy. And then the last one, the Sands of Shurax, which was more desert themed, which I thought honestly was very creative and it was very well run. So let's take a look at this. As always, I like and dislike some of the stuff that Gamefound does. I love being able to click on the side here and just go to various areas. I'm still not a huge fan of the featured pledge thing, but that's me personally. Okay, so what do we got here? Again, the core, you're getting a bunch of stuff. You're getting a lot of stuff in any of these games, like I mentioned. That is never the issue, especially when the stretch goals get revealed and get hit. Again, stuff with these previous iterations of the campaign has never been a question. And the variability that will often come with the customization of the characters as well is quite deep. And you can see here, even on the side, okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4, because as with the other campaigns, they are allowing previous iterations to be added as add-ons. So what do we got going here? Like I said, it's cooperative, it's fantasy, it's variable powers, variable customization on the RPG side of things, but this is where a lot of people may not like it. It is a hex grid, but it also has, boom, dice rolling and press your luck. And if you like that, you should be looking at this. And I'd be lying to you if I wasn't looking at this one, because after seeing Sands, which was tempting, this one is a little bit more of my vibe-ish. just because I do like the Transylvania. I do like the Bloodborne-ish theme. Now, I know you're going to say, Chris, you complained about the Bloodborne being too explicit. Yes, I didn't like some of the miniatures. Anyway, side point. But there's levels of difficulty, and you can change the game length. So if you're not wanting to play a 3-hour game, because some of those in these scenarios are long, you just need to be aware of that, and you can adapt it. And there's a story. You know, how much story do you want to have? How much fluff do you want to have? How much narrative do you have? Or do you just want to be dry bones and let's mechanics. So like I said, hero building, adventure, board game, toolkit. And I can't speak to this. I haven't looked at it specifically at retail, but I also don't see it widely available, like being shined at retail as well from a lot of the online distributors. So I am going to take their word that I think this is probably a good price point, especially when you factor in some of the stretch goals because of the shipping side of things too, and just because of how they sometimes delineate the two. Components, and they are a small company. This is what they do. This artwork is fantastic, freaking fantastic. I like this. This is cool. Here are all of the variabilities, and this is maybe some of you guys that can speak to the variability here, and that's the one thing I will say about some of the CMON games or some of the others that say, okay, we've got a trillion combinations of things. How different are these, and how balanced are these? That's my biggest concern. When you give me X number of iterations of things, I don't want just slight reskins, and I don't want slight rethemes. I want true differentiation, and that would just be my biggest concern on this. But, and the 2 million, yep, whatever. Okay. Give me quality and a little less quantity, and I'm much happier. Villains, again, this artwork is fantastic. Gosh darn it. I said this earlier in the video, I'm going to be watching gameplay videos. I am going to be watching gameplay videos this weekend. I'm sorry. Okay. So, pledge levels, again, I wish pledge levels were a little bit lower because you still haven't shown me, unlike Space Plague, like, how am I actually playing this? What is all this stuff on the bottom of the villain card, right? How am I, figuring out these stats? What am I doing with the combination of these things? So none of that is there. The artwork is very pretty. It's collecting my eyes like it's supposed to. So this is getting you $99, the basic pledge. This is just the core, is just $64. So this is getting you, the expansion as well as the living card deck. I have no clue what the living card deck is though right now. Gets you the core game plus the expansion. So 99 versus that, and you're getting the living card deck for 10 extra bucks. Okay, still don't know what that is. That gets you extra the hero chest. Don't know what the hero chest is. Don't want all of the bundle, but that gets you 5 of the core games if you're going for the bundle. And this is everything. $390. That is a ton of stuff. Early bird, no, not early bird, early ship. Okay. And there you go. Okay, so then you get all the stretch goals here, a little bit more of everything. One of the stretch goals was the expansion. And what are you getting? Okay, more add-ons. Let's see. Are you going to tell me what they are? Okay, 3 independent containers. It just holds everything. Okay, hold it. Okay, makes sense. Posters, bags, dice. Kind of like those orange dice. Anyway. Getting distracted. I'm easily distracted. Shiny. Other games. So here you go. Going through all of the various ones. This is the Valley of the Dead King. This is the Forest of Adramon. So it looks like the living card deck is a thing from previous ones. So it's not something that's new. I just clearly wasn't exposed to it. So here you go. The core, the expansion, the living card deck. So the living card deck is a thing, and it's just adding more everything cards. Nighttime, daytime, investigation encounters. So more of all of the good stuff. So you can get a little bit of everything you want. Young Silver Dragon, Solar Elf. I love the theme in this side of things. Demonologist, Blood Mage, Death Knight. Gosh darn it. I do not need to be backing anything else right now. Stop tempting me. Okay, early ship. I don't care about that unless you're going to offer the new one as an early ship. And this looks like this is all of the old stuff, right? Yep, okay. So which one is right for me? Okay. Where should I start? They recommend the first one. The biggest number of heroes there. So if you really want that, we would not suggest you start with Sans, new systems. Yeah, there you go. I like this. This is beautiful. I give them a lot of props for this. Detailing which one of these are right for you. How complex. It's great. Now, is this one down here, the new one, the least complex? That would be my only concern. I want something slightly complex, but not super easy either. And I mean, the reviews are good. Reviews are good on Board Game Geek. So I think you're seeing that with the funding. So how do you play? Here we go. Here we go. But you can see it, though, on the side here. You can't even find it. So it's down pretty far. Okay, you get your hero, you get your dice, you move out, you start in a village, you get all your stuff. Great. Move, roll, circumstance, events, and roll for Mirza Noctis' act. The events around you. So there you go. And you can just kind of see the basic, flow of things. And Mirza Noctis being the villain in this sense. I am not going to read that because I'm guessing it's pretty long based on a lot of these dungeon crawlers tend to be. So let's take a look. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm not going to read this. It is 94 pages. But I might take a deeper dive this weekend in terms of some of the depth, seeing what differentiations there are. I'm okay with that. Okay. Again, here you can see some of the customization. So it is more RPG-ish, and that would probably be my biggest concern is, as I said with Bardsong, I didn't back Bardsong because if I want to play a role-playing game, I'm going to play a role-playing game. I don't want to play necessarily a dungeon crawler that's acting as a role-playing game. But, this is tempting because I really like the theme, I really like the art, and I like what it's offering. So this is definitely something different than the typical role-playing game or dungeon crawler. A little bit about what's going on in the background, collectors, villages, investigations, clues, runes, runestones, all of the aspects, and it looks beautiful on the table, I won't lie. Here are videos, I know what I'm going to be watching this weekend, and there's a little bit of everything from a lot of channels, so there's no lack of videos as well. So it looks great. Shipping costs, what is shipping going to cost us? So core and expansion is going to be 20 bucks. Well, that's about right. Okay. I think these are a little bit bigger box, so there you go. And so about a year for the new volume. Okay, fair enough. Promos, returning backer promos. Okay. If you backed previous, we're giving you $5 credit, and you get a hollow foil poster. There you go. Yeah, I like it. It's probably one of the standouts. There's a reason it's almost at 170,000. I think you should check this out. I think it's different than a lot of the other dungeon crawlers. I think it's worth maybe not reading the 94-page rulebook, but watching 10 or 20 minutes of the gameplay from one of those videos to see how different it is for you, because I think with some of that RPG stuff, especially when you have those markers on the boards as well, how tedious is that going to get? And I know there's some overhead and there's some upkeep there, and sometimes you want that in a game like this, and sometimes you don't. And that's probably going to be a little bit of the make or to break it for me as well. So we'll see. Okay, that's it. That is the roundup for this week. I think something like 20 games or so. So, it's a slow week. Anyway, as always, tomorrow will be the upcoming for the following week. The big one obviously being Marvel X-Men United. That, having played now the base of my pledge with a few other little things thrown in there, I will be probably pledging it all in for that. I hate to say that, but my son loves it. I really like it, and the depth that it actually offers and the difficulty is surprising. It is. It really is. Don't judge it by the core. So, anyway, there's probably, a dozen or so total next week. I haven't even looked. So, you'll see it when I do. I will probably be having my first-ish review coming out as well on Sunday, so look for that and the new title. I think I know what I'm going to go with. I'll probably change it up once or twice between now and then. And then hopefully I'll have time to do a Monday morning quarterback hotness. So we'll just kind of see what happens after that next week. So don't expect this every week with like a video every single day. This was a lot, I won't lie. But I like it, so that's why I did it. Okay. Thanks for checking it out. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for putting up with me. Hyperspace KRAKEN! Okay. See you guys. Stay classy.